Hi, I'm Mary Lyons, the Wealth Woman.
And I'm Eric Alexander with Acorn Grove.
Welcome to the Wealth and Income Podcast.
That's
Well,
right.
what we're going to talk about is how to get on the same page as your spouse or partner when you're talking about money.
Yeah.
Because I think it's pretty common that people are like, "Oh, you're an advisor. That's mostly math, right?" And our response is, "It's at least half therapy."
At minimum, like at most
Right.
half, right? At most half, right? Maybe 75% couples therapy. It's probably
Yeah.
closer.
And I think that happens because most people are not actually on the same page about money. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you are fighting about money with your spouse on a regular basis. But
Right.
aside from infidelity being the number one cause of divorce in America, the number two cause is money. And we
Right.
can't do anything about what's going on the first part of that. But the second one we can talk about.
Right.
I think
No doubt.
there's solutions that we can do here. So, being on the same page about money is, I think, one of the best things you can do for your marriage or for your relationship. Because when you are on the same page, it's one less thing to be thinking about or stressing about or moving in different directions about. So, I think the
Yeah.
first thing we want to talk about is creating a shared vision. And
Yeah.
that goes beyond a shared vision for your money. It's really about building a shared vision for your life because we believe money is just a tool that is meant to help you build a life you are excited about, but you have to start by knowing what what you will be excited about.
Yeah. And there's a great quote by Jim Carrey, and I had to pull it up because I was gonna forget it. But he said something, I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can see that it's not the answer.
Right.
And I think so much of like some of the conversations that I know I've had with Amy, my wife, is where do we want to go and what do we want to do? And we need to buy this thing and have this thing. And wouldn't it be cooler if we had a bigger house and like all of these things, right? And then we do some of it, and then we come home and we're like, well, "That was nice. It was okay, but
But
it
maybe
wasn't.
it didn't do everything you hoped it would.
But it wasn't monumental. I'm still the same. Everywhere you go, there you are, right? I'm still the
Right.
same person when I came home, and we still have the same problems and the same whatevers, right? And I think part of that shared vision is at the end of the day, when we're 20 years older than we are now, when we're 50 years older than we are right now, what do we want life to look like? Do we want kids that are around us? Do we want grandkids? Okay, well, that means we may need to live somewhere else. If it, it's there's a progression that happens, a waterfall on the other end of that shared vision.
Well, and I think some of this goes back to some conversations we've had on air before.
Sure.
And I immediately think of the book Wanting by Luke Burgess and
Yep.
understanding the
Yes.
difference between a thick desire and a thin desire. A thick desire being something that's actually fulfilling and actually really important to you. A thin desire being something that we have learned to want by looking outward. So
Yes.
it's the I want this flashy car because it means something to the people around me. But then you have the flashy car, and the only thing that you're really feeling is stress because you have to make the car payment. So it I think
Right.
that hits your point, right?
Yeah.
There are things that we think will create fulfillment, but they're not really things that we want. They're things that we have been taught to want by marketing or by looking at other people and having that FOMO feeling. It's not necessarily what really pulls you. So I think part of finding a shared vision is having some deeper conversations about what you want. And I think the dreams workshop that we host is a big part of this. But even
Right.
inside of that, we're revamping it right now because of conversations we've been having with clients and with each other. Because some of the things that go on the dreams list are, to your point, acquisitions or experiences or any of that.
Right.
And, we've been reading this book called 4,000 Weeks, which we have a podcast coming out if it hasn't already, where we go in depth on this. But it talks about this kind of exact concept of,
Yeah.
when you start acquiring things, you just want all the things, but you're never going to have them all. Or when you start going and doing all of these experiences, you're never going to have all of the experiences. And so you have to get very clear on which of those things really matter to you
Right.
and do those things and let go of all of the other things, but you can't do that in a relationship without conversation. So I think
Yes.
the Dreams Workshop is a good place
100%.
to
Yes.
start the conversation. And we facilitate some of that, but then we want you to take that home and build it out because
Yeah.
it's it should be an ongoing discussion. And that's where I know in our household, we've been doing this for 4 years now, where once a year we sit down as a family, we go through all the different categories of our life: travel, spirituality, health, finances, relationships, all of that. And we talk about what was really important in the year prior and what we want to do in the year coming up. And then we actually schedule all the things that matter to
Yeah.
us for the next 12 months so that we can do them all. But we had a really hard time with this when we first started doing it because, Mike and I were on different pages.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
So we had an episode, we have two episodes actually with a psychologist named Ryan Holloman.
Yeah.
And Eric, do you remember what episodes those were?
Yeah. We had two of them, episode 117 and episode 121. So they were about month and a half apart between those two conversations.
And he really spends some times giving tips for how to stop fighting with your spouse and how to have shared vision.
Right.
And I know it was instrumental in the conversations that I was having with Mike because at some point I said, "Hey, I want this thing." And Mike was like, "Oh, I want no part of that." And I was like, "No, I want this." And the thing that Ryan said in that episode that just made it click for me, or maybe we had this conversation prior to doing the episode, and I was like, we need to do an episode on this.
Right.
But it was, what part of your vision is mandatory and what part of the vision is negotiable? And the way those questions played out in our life is that at the time, I was adamant that I wanted a house and house because I
Right.
wanted to be in nature and I wanted to go skiing. And Mike was like, I don't want that. And when we talked about it and he asked which part of this is mandatory, it was about being in nature, having a place that wasn't hectic and frenetic, that allowed me to kind of come down from the daily pace of business and life, and spending the time making memories and traditions with our kids so that they would want to come back and do those things again when they're older and have their own children. And when
Yeah.
he understood that that was the mandatory part of it for me, he helped me understand that the part that was negotiable was the location.
Yeah.
And it actually made more sense to buy a property that wasn't 12 hours away from us. It's an hour and a half away from us. And that's our lake house, and we use it all the time. And so these conversations, when you are listening for understanding and trying to get there, sometimes when you have the right language, the conversation gets a lot easier. And for me, that what part of this is negotiable and which part of this is mandatory really helped clarify what mattered to me and allowed us to get on the same page because Mike's highest priority is and always has been, how do I be the best dad and spouse possible? And so the idea
Yeah.
of family tradition and time together as a family was incredibly important to him. But maintenance on a property 12 hours away that we wouldn't get to use on a regular basis didn't hit that for him.
Well, and I think the other component of that is at the end of the day, if you didn't have the money to go buy a second house on a lake, maybe it's just rearrange your schedule, not you specifically, but like if family time is most important, being out of nature is most important, maybe there's a simple thing that costs you zero money and it's just rearranging your schedule and letting go of some other obligations that allow you to
Having
go
a game
spend,
night on
right,
Friday.
or go
Yeah.
spend time in the park next door or do some other things. And so I think part of that is there's a shared creativity that you get to go bring in, but I
Hmm.
can be creative when I know what the outcome looks like or what the intent of the outcome. Like I want to be around family. Okay, well then that opens up a whole range of things we could go do. Right. And so I
Right.
think some of that is money based and some of it is just how do we rearrange our lives?
And I think to your point, Eric, this shared creativity that like hits a chord with me because I think one of the things that happens when you first start dating somebody and it's new and exciting is that you start picturing what your life together could be like. And so there's all these
Correct.
possibilities, and you talk about what you want, and there's an intimacy in that. And then when you're in a relationship, especially if you've been in the relationship for years or even decades, is that because you see the person every day, you assume you know everything that's happening in their
Yeah.
inner life, but you aren't having the same conversations you had during courtship. If your relationship is anything like mine, and I have talked to a lot of people who've had a shared experience here, it's about logistics of the day to day
All
and the
day
activity of
long.
living. Right. And there's no dreaming anymore. There's
Right.
no vision creation. There's not the same creativity. And so I think going through and creating a list of dreams together that is not meant to be a one-day bucket list, but an active pipeline of dreams that you are going to work on fulfilling,
Yeah.
it gives you the moment to kind of reconnect with a partner who may have evolved in a direction that could surprise you in a very positive way. And so I think finding the places that the vision is shared and building on those as
Yeah.
opposed to just being like, oh, I don't want that thing. Why would you do that? I think is key. And that actually leads me to the second piece of this, which is really understanding that you and your spouse, partner, boyfriend, girlfriend have different financial blueprints. And and what I
Yeah.
mean by that is you are raised in different households with different norms and different expectations, both spoken and unspoken. And those different histories have created specific thoughts and neural pathways about money that show up differently for the two of you. And
Yeah.
sometimes that can be just as stressful as getting on the same page from a vision perspective, because this impacts the day to day of how you deal with money.
Well, and I think a lot of that is not what happened to you, it's how you interpret what happened to you or what
Mm-hmm.
life looked like. I remember having a conversation with some clients and just years and years ago, and we were having that conversation. So what she wanted to have lots and lots and lots of cash on hand, just gobs and gobs of money in a savings account doing nothing. That made her feel safe. And the husband was like, nope, we need to go invest this money. We need to go make it grow. We need to go do these things. I'm like, okay, you guys are clearly not on the same page on your money blueprint. Tell me about your experiences when you were kids. Like, what was money like?
Sound like a
They,
real therapist right now.
they had the exact same experience as kids.
Mhm.
Separately, they said, my dad was always working. We were an entrepreneurial family. One month we'd be flush. The next month we'd be out of money. We'd have to go figure it out. And the wife on that situation said, I never want to be in that situation again. I want to have stability. I hated that part of it. The husband was like, we're all over the place, but you know what? It always ended up working out. And so his blueprint on that, even though they had the exact same upbringing, I mean, separately, they weren't brother and sister. That would have been
Got
weird.
it.
But
Good.
they were,
Okay.
yeah, but they had the exact same sort of historical background, but their impression of it was very different in how that blew through.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really easy in situations like that to have judgment for your partner for not thinking the same way you do. And again, I can speak to my own experience here. Poor Mike, like all our dirty laundry gets aired on air. I think that for me, so that what you just explained, sort of the entrepreneurial household with the
Right.
building, sometimes we're certainly more lucrative than others, but I kind of grew up with a mentality of it's cool, we can just make more, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's money as a resource, money with a true abundance mindset of you work harder, more money shows up. You take the right steps and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Whereas I think for Mike, there was a little bit more fear around that was passed down generationally because on his mother's side, several generations back, they were dirt farmers. And so they didn't own the land, they were farming, and it
Right.
was tough a lot of times. And so, Mike had more of a tendency to want to hold on to the assets that were happening and to be very conservative and not take risk. And I was like, oh no, we need to find opportunity. And so we could look at the same situation and he would see risk and I would see opportunity. And I'll be candid. I was super judgmental about that. I mean,
100%.
in a way that probably was not even probably, in a way that was not kind. And what I have realized as I have gotten older and matured and gone through experiences with him is that Mike's gift is really deliberation and identifying threats and figuring out how to deal with them. And so when I take the time to appreciate his contribution and ask questions from a place of curiosity, because I really want to know what you're thinking and what's motivating this, as
Yeah.
opposed to asking questions from a place of judgment, which is a very different thing, that we actually make
Yes, it is.
much better decisions together because I can see the opportunity and he can make sure that we don't derail the opportunity because there are things that maybe I have not thought through as completely as he has. And so
Right.
when you start to understand that your partner's perspective is not wrong, it is different, and that both of you have issues and both of you have things that you can contribute, both of you can get to a place of better understanding and learn to rely on each other in a way that is healthy and helpful as opposed to judgmental and destructive.
Yeah. And having been in the middle of financial counseling hundreds and thousands of times with, thousands of people, I find over and over again, and the phrase I've used a lot lately is sometimes we don't get the spouse that we want, we get the spouse that we need. And I think sometimes we want the one that feels like us and sounds like us and thinks like us because it's easy. But the reason that we married them or in a relationship with them is because they complete us in a different way than we thought.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's not as fun as we'd like it to be, but it's always necessary.
Well, and I'm going to give some advice specifically for the ladies here on this one. And this is hard earned knowledge on my part, is that the most important thing you can do when you are talking about money with your spouse is to do it in a way that shows respect for the person you are with. Because the moment you communicate without that respect, you're not going to get there. So acknowledging that just because someone thinks differently than you doesn't mean that their way of thinking is wrong, right? It's about, again, finding the place where you guys can work together as a team to move forward. It requires the questions from a place of understanding, not judgment and disrespect. And that
Yeah, and I
is,
don't know if that's a lady thing. I think that's a both end of it because I've done that poorly as well. So uh, I think that's a message for both.
yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's talk about the third thing. So once you can find that shared vision together and you can acknowledge the blueprints and you can identify these are the things that might be hard for us to get over, and you can kind of compassionately start to move in the same direction. I think the next piece of this is you can't do it on a hope and a prayer. You have to actually build a plan or a strategy to
Yeah.
help get there. And actually, Eric, before we jump into that, we on the blueprint part, we talked a little bit about family history, but can you talk a little bit about general motivation? Because I think you're brilliant in this space.
Yeah, well, and you and I had the opportunity to sit down with an Enneagram expert. I'm a we both are big fans of sort of the Enneagram modeling or any number of the assessments. And we got a chance to sit down a couple of years ago with a guy named Ian Morgan Cron that does tremendous amount of work on the Enneagram space. He wrote Road Back to You, The Story of You. He's written a number of books on that side of it. And so we got to sit down, and it's episodes 187 through 195, talking
Mhm.
about the motivation of each of the Enneagram types and how to know what your type is and what are the motivations, what are the fears. And so one of the things we thought through on that and we've been working through on that is if I know what my spouse is motivated by and I know what their deepest fears are, then I can navigate those conversations in a much more nuanced and tailored way than just running over them through my own view of the world. Like everybody thinks like a five. I'm a five. Everybody thinks like a five. It's like actually nobody thinks like a five. You're just weird. But like if I understand how my wife functions, then I can ask better questions.
Mhm.
And a total hack and a total side hack on this, because I don't have a lot of time to do research, not as much as I would like,
Mhm.
is, and I did this a couple weeks ago. I loaded, because my wife has taken Strengths Finder, which is from the Gallup side and Enneagram and all the rest of it. I found an AI and I loaded up all of her stuff into that. This is who this woman is with all of her assessments. And then I just asked it questions. Okay, how might she respond to this? What about this? What about this? How can I have this conversation better? And it's given me a kind of a cheat sheet for when we need to have a money conversation or we need to have a harder conversation about something. How do I at least start it right
Mhm.
so that I don't put my foot in my mouth from moment one and then I'm spending the next 30 minutes pulling my foot out of my mouth? I can start from a better place.
Right. Right. Well, and I love that. And I think the motivators are key because if you understand what someone else is motivated by, then you
Right.
can be more sensitive when you're talking about different, I mean, all types of conflict, let's be honest, but money
Right.
conflict in particular. If really these podcasts are about how the Enneagram relates to money motivators more
Right.
than anything else. And so, and I love what you did, Eric, because it's such a five thing to do.
Right.
I'm an 8 on the Enneagram for anybody who is interested. And I think we did not know what my husband's number was when we recorded those podcasts because he had not finished a more in-depth assessment. And
Right.
a previous assessment had said he was a 5, but I always had reservations about that because he's very outgoing and very outspoken, and you don't usually see that with 5s to the
Right.
degree that he lives it. But when he took the full assessment, my husband is actually an 8. And where 8s go in times of stress is they go to 5. So he was,
Correct.
at the time, he was very stressed out. And so he was showing up differently than his natural motivators. So there's defensive motivators, and then there's your typical motivators. And he was totally playing defense at that point in time. So I just put that as an aside because I had a reaction to all of that, but it's new information. But I love what you did with the AI, Eric, because when we're looking at the world from our own framing, we tend to only see things our way. And
Right.
so the fact that you engaged an outside resource to say, what's happening here? How should I address it? And it's fact-based is so cool to me.
Well, at the beginning of the year, I love the new year. I love January because it's like a blank sheet of paper, and I want to go figure out what all we can do. And my wife hates it. She hates that conversation because I kind of have like 1,000
It's
versions of
all
what we can go
change.
do. It's all
Ideas
changing,
can change.
and the change is amazing. Like it's energizing. And so the AI, to its credit and how we built it out, they're like, look, you need to have 4 or 5 different 30-minute meetings. You need to bring her an agenda. You need to have it slow. No more shiny object in those meetings. And so it was very helpful to kind of think, oh, I never thought about it from that way. How do I
Mhm.
get into her head without having to be in her head?
Right,
So
right.
yeah,
So I think that's key, right? Because that's making sure that you're trying to meet somebody on their level for the
yeah,
purpose of moving together, right? I mean, it took me a long time as an adult to understand that fights are not about winning. They're about finding a resolution that works for both parties. And I think if you approach any of this that way, right, the goal is to further your marriage, not your own personal agenda. I think
yeah.
you do it differently when you're thinking about that. That may be the poignant moment of this podcast, I think. Right? Just that one thing. That's an aha that I had at some point. And it makes all the difference in the world, I think.
Yeah.
But let's go to
Well, the
building.
great phrase on that, just to round that out, is like, if your mission is to always win, then that means you married a loser. And nobody wants to be married to a loser.
Right.
So make sure everybody's winning so that everybody's happy. So
Right. I love that. So, okay, let's go to building a plan. I think on this front, right, if you have gotten to the point where you've identified what you think you want from your life, knowing that it's going to change and evolve as both you and your spouse do, and you've addressed here are the things that may be preventing us from moving in that direction, and you've gotten to understand each other, the motivators, where you're coming from, the histories, then I think that's that next stop. All that's good, but you have to do something about it. And this is where
Right.
plan and strategy comes in. And I think some of this is about, I don't know, what I've seen happen to people, regardless of income level, is that a lot of people trade what they really want for what they want right now because they
Yeah.
don't have a plan or a strategy to get there. And an example of this from my own life, and here you go. You always get these pieces where I'm like, this is probably going to hurt my professional credibility, but I'm going to go ahead and share it anyways.
That's right.
I actually had to do the math at some point on if I bought a specific pair of shoes, how much income was that going to take away from me every year of retirement? And the
Right.
reason I had to do that is because I am an impulse spender. I have no problem acknowledging that. I have the same problems that everyone else does. I know what I'm supposed to do about them. It doesn't mean I always do it. But one of the things that really made a difference for me was understanding if I spend $200 on this pair of shoes, how many days of retirement am I giving up? How much income am I giving up in retirement?
Right.
How many days of sitting on a beach drinking a Mai Tai am I not going to have because I'm buying this pair of shoes? And I think that if you don't have a plan in place and you don't have a way to model that, finding someone who can model that for you will give you the clarity. Because I'm going to tell you the truth. Sometimes the shoes are worth it, but there
Right.
are other times they're not. And if I don't know what I'm giving up in order to make this decision, it's really easy to make this decision because it's instant and I get gratification. But if I have a strategy and a plan and I'm clear on what I really want, it's very easy for me to then go, well, I don't really want or need those shoes in that particular situation because the other thing is more important to me. Or I can weigh it and say, no, that other thing is actually not more important to me. I
Right.
want to take this trip with my family and create the memories, whatever that looks like.
Right. Yeah, and I think having that income plan is the perfect piece of that, and we talk about that a lot with clients, the juice and the squeeze. If I do this, I get that, and I think so often, especially in an investment only mentality of it's I got to save more, got to save more, got to save more, got to save more, and all of that is about future potential, future possibilities, but
Mhm.
at the expense of today. And if I don't have that clear linkage between what I'm doing today and what that might turn into, then there's no way to sort of logically fight against it. It's just shame.
Right.
It's just, man, why was I so weak
Oh,
to
yeah.
have Starbucks today? Why was I so weak to buy another pair of shoes or whatever it is your vice
Right.
is?
I should have done this. Or not doing the thing because you feel like you should be putting the money away.
Correct. Right.
And
But
then
if you
you
don't
don't
know the
take the
value of
trip.
the dollar, then you have no way to logically make sense of it.
Right. Yeah. I think that's key. That strategy piece, that's the implementation side of this.
Yeah.
And I think this goes to really addressing three key parts of that. And one is how am I purchasing the things I'm going to purchase? And is there a way for me
maybe amazing
Ha ha
today.
ha. Right, right. Um, okay, well, I think that's good. I mean, right? We're going to start with building a dreams list. We're going to make sure we understand the financial blueprint for ourselves and for our partner so that we
Yeah,
can start to merge our blueprints together. And I think this is good for parenting too, you guys, is having these conversations where your kids get to participate in this so they have an awareness of how they're forming their blueprints. And
yeah,
then the third thing is building a plan or a strategy that addresses your acquisitions, your investments, and your eventual income so that you can actually create deliberately the space for all of your dreams together. And when you
yeah.
do that, there should be an intensity of emotional connection that is very positive as opposed to negative. And it's all about building intimacy in your relationship and a life that you are excited to share. Eric, if
100%.
they are looking for you, where can they find you?
You can find me at Acorn Grove wherever you use social media. How about you?
If you're looking for me, you can find me at The Wealth Woman. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Specific financial concepts and advanced strategies are presented to you for educational purposes only. We cannot and do not guarantee their applicability to your individual circumstance. We encourage you to seek personalized advice from qualified professionals on all financial matters.
Provided content is for overview and is not intended and should not be relied upon as individualized tax, legal, fiduciary, or investment advice. Neither Wealth Woman, Acorn Grove, or the Wealth and Income podcast, nor their representatives provide tax or legal advice. For answers to specific questions and before making any decision, please consult a qualified attorney or tax advisors.
All numeric examples and any individual shown are hypothetical and were used for explanatory purposes only. Actual results may vary.
Investing involves risk, which includes potential loss of principal. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Guarantees are subject to the claims paying ability of the issuing insurance company.
Life insurance should be purchased by individuals that have a need to provide a death benefit to protect others with insurable interests in their lives against financial loss. Life insurance is not a retirement plan, investment, or savings account.
Not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or any governmental agency. Insurance and investment products, not a deposit, not FDIC or NCUA insured, not insured by any federal government agency, not guaranteed by any bank or credit union, may lose value.
Please visit the Wealth Woman website disclosure page for other important disclosures.